Well, good evening. Glad to have you here. Glad to have the rain. Glad it made it to us today. Need every drop of it. Tonight we're going to continue on prayer, talking about prayer and just some thoughts about it and how we can be better in our prayer life. And that's what we want to be, praying more to the Lord. We'll begin with a word of prayer. And John Wendell, would you lead some prayer? I want to start off with a letter. It wasn't written to me. It was written to a preacher friend of mine about 10 years ago from a lady who lost her husband. I want to read it. It's not a long letter, but it gets to the point here. So read what she had to say. And what caused her to write this letter is a class or lesson one that he presented on prayer. And then she responded with this letter. She said, I lost my husband, and she names him, in March to a brain tumor. He was 55, and we had been married for 35 years. And he was my best friend and the love of my life since I was 17. He had 2 surgeries and chemo and radiation. He was doing well and working up to 3 weeks ago, and he got worse. I did not expect this, and I am in shock, in disbelief, and very angry with God. I was a devout Christian all my life, trusting and believing that God would take care of us. I did everything the Bible says. Prayed without ceasing, asking, knowing that I would receive. Called on the elders to pray. I never doubted for a second that God would heal him, and then God took him away. I feel so angry and hurt and abandoned by the one I trusted the most. It makes no sense. I needed him desperately, and I am lost. There are no words and nothing anyone else can do. I am here alone, and my life ended when God took him. I was a firm believer in the power of prayer. I was the one who took our children, family, and friends. I was the one who told our children, family, and friends, and co-workers to pray for my husband. I knew he would heal him and let him live. I put all that I had into God's hand and knew that if we did all that was humbly possible, God would take care of the rest. But he said no and took my life away. I feel that is very selfish of God. I no longer pray. I have no words. I scream and yell at God and let him know that I am angry and don't understand how he put his children through such horrible things. I don't see love in that. He is going to get us eventually, and why didn't he give us a long, healthy life on earth? We had plans to retire together, grow old together, and do so much more work for the Lord. That all has been taken away. I have no life, no motivation, no joy, no faith, no belief, nothing. God took my husband away when I needed him most. God took my husband away from his grandchildren, and he was their only Paul they had. Yes, God gave his only son for us, but he got him right back. I want my husband back. And I tell this to God every day. So how or so much good could have been done if God had given us health and life? We would have spread the word like wildfire, and who knows how many souls we could have saved. There's the letter. What is your impression of that letter? Sort of sad. Here's somebody that's very hurt. Somebody's going through the grieving process, no doubt. A person who looks into the future is hopeless. And she's angry. And she's taking it out on God, blaming Him every step of the way for what has happened. Could this woman be compared to Job? Somewhat, a little bit. Only difference is Job never blamed God, never did. After all he went through with his finances, we would say, his servants, with his children, and then his health himself, he never blamed God. In Job 2 and verse 10, but he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women speak. Shall we indeed accept good from God? Shall we not accept adversity? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. He didn't sin. He asked God questions, and there's nothing wrong with questioning God, but he never blamed God for the things that came about in his life. I know other Christians, maybe not to this extent that this woman did, but I know some other Christians who have lashed out to God in times of difficulty. You know, why? Asking all those questions, why they did that, why things happened to them. And I know that whenever things like this do happen, there's a lot of confusion. Again, a lot of grief and a lot of hardship, and the emotions are at a breaking point. And so I think we all understand that. Maybe many of us have been there at times. But we need to refrain from accusing God. We don't need to do that. This woman, she needed to be corrected, maybe not right then. Not right then, by no means, but eventually. With time, someone just needs to sit down and talk with her. And the good news is somebody did. And this woman repented. And this woman turned it around, and she is still a faithful Christian today. After going through that and accusing God, giving up on God, but she came around to a better way of understanding. And of course, there may be days that will come into our lives like this, and we need to do our best today to prepare for that day. Now, we don't know what it holds, but we need to do our best today. Whenever that day comes, here's how I hope to handle it. And that's what we need to be preparing for. I hope to handle it in a certain way. Some folks refuse to even think about it. I don't even want to think about that. Well, boom, it happens, and then they're not really prepared to handle it. But yet we need to think about it. Daniel was one that thought about it. And Daniel 1 and verse 8, But Daniel purposed in his heart that he will not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now, this is when Daniel, really all of Judah was taken into Babylonian captivity. They were mistreated. But Daniel made up his mind. He purposed in his heart, I'm not going to sin during all this. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to compromise. I'm not going to eat this unclean meat that the king is going to offer me. I'm not going to drink his wine. He purposed in his heart, here's how I'm going to handle this. And that's how he handled it. And hopefully we'll do the same thing. We won't blame God. And we're going to do our best to handle it in the right way when the difficulty comes. And as Daniel did, let's purpose in our heart. When hardships come about, I'm going to glorify God. I'm going to try my best to do that when the hardships come about. And of course, that's what Daniel did. By doing it, by not defiling himself, he was giving God the glory in all this. And things worked out for Daniel, as we know. Even after being put into the lion's den, everything worked out for him. Israel did the same thing whenever Israel was delivered from Egypt. Everything thought was going pretty good. Here they are headed somewhere. And all of a sudden they come to the Red Sea on one side. On the other side, here comes Pharaoh. The dust of the army's coming. And what do? They blame God. They turn on God. Exodus 14, verses 10 through 12 is where this happens. And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. So they were very afraid, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. Then when they said to Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you dealt with us to bring us up out of Egypt? Is this not the word that we told you in Egypt, saying, let us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than it would to die in the wilderness. So here they're blaming Moses. In a sense, they're blaming God. You brought us out here to die. You should have left us. The hardship they're going through, what they think they're about to go through. Well, that was the wrong response. God had brought them through so much with all the plagues and then the deliverance and now this. Why couldn't they use some hindsight and see what God had done for them? How He'd taken care of them. But Moses responds to it in verse 13, Exodus 14:13. And Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which He will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. So Moses answered their request, their complaints. The Lord's going to fight for you. He's going to be there to help you. So here we find Israel doing what they were doing, complaining, blaming God, blaming Moses when things got difficult. Instead of, they should have been turning to God more, knowing that He was going to help them. So what do we do with unanswered prayers? How do we harmonize what happened in the Scriptures to what happens in life? And we've all prayed for things that did not happen. We prayed for a healing of ourselves or for someone else. It may be we prayed for a job, a situation there that didn't work out. 1,000 things we have prayed for. And can we say that every one was answered? Probably not. Unless you say, God said no, well, that's an answer, of course, but answer in a way that we want it to go, probably that hasn't happened. So what do we do with these unanswered prayers? Well, in Matthew 7, verse 7 and 8, a verse that can be misunderstood, Christ said, ask, it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be open. That seems like a 100% guarantee. Whatever you ask, it's there. You knock, it's going to be open. That's what it sounds like. But we know that's not the case. That's not the case. And the reason we know it's not the case, because we got to continue reading verse 9 through 11. Or what man is there among you, if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask Him? God is not going to give us something that is bad for us. He's only going to give us what is good. You may ask, according to His will, if it's good, God's going to give. If it's bad, He's going to say, no, you don't need that. Let me give you what is better. That's what He will do. What is beneficial to us is what He will give. We may not want what God gives, but it's going to be the best. And it may be if we don't want it, God may not give it. That may be a possibility. But God is only going to give what is good. Only what is good. And things that happen in life that are bad, you don't turn to God on that one. He didn't do it. Didn't do it. So sometimes when it comes to asking, we need to understand that how God answers, how He answers. Well, why doesn't God give us what we ask for? That's another good question. That probably, why did God not answer my prayer? Why did God answer my prayer? We don't ever ask that question. We ask why He didn't. When He does, do we ask, why did you do that, God? Why did you answer my prayer? Why did you do that for? How many things have happened in our life because of prayer? How many things have not happened because of prayer? And we may never know. It's hard to tell what it is. When God says yes, when God says no, we may never know. How would my life be different if something did happen? Or how would it be different since it didn't happen? How's my life different? There's a lot of things to think about when we think about God answering or not answering prayer. And when we do get what we ask for, it's always good to give God the credit. Understand He gets the glory for it. And but why doesn't He give us what we ask for? It may not be the best for us. In Philippians 4 and verse 6, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. In everything, let our requests be made known to God. When was the last time that we thanked God? Hopefully in our last prayer. Maybe we did. I hope we did. You ever thank God for no reason? Well, sure, we'll thank Him when things work out, what we've been praying for. When's the last time we thanked Him for really no apparent reason? You go up to somebody and say, I want to thank you. And I say, well, what for? Well, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being you. Maybe that's good enough. And thank God for being God. But we know that God has blessed us in more ways than we'll ever realize. We know that. And maybe one day we will. We can look back in heaven and just see what He did do, what He accomplished for us. And there's some people who believe that everything happens for a reason. And there may be reasons behind certain things happening. But we got to be careful that we say everything happens for a reason, because it may not. There may not be a reason there, because things just happen. Sometimes things just happen. And a good verse to answer that with, when a person says, well, I don't believe in luck, I believe everything happens for a reason. The good way to answer that is the parable of the Good Samaritan in Luke chapter 10. Look what happens here. Luke 10:30 and 31. Then Jesus answered and said, a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a certain priest came down the road. When he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Verse 31. Now by chance. It just so happened. It just so happened that the priest came by and saw him and did nothing. The other comes by, sees him, does nothing, and then the Samaritan. By chance. It just happened. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes your path will cross with somebody else just by chance. And it's good that when it does, we make the most of it. But here, it just happened to be that way. in the book of Philemon when the runaway slave. What's this? Oh, something's going on. I thought somebody was shot. But anyway, I forgot where I was. Yeah, by chance. Happened by chance. There are things that happen by chance. Make the most of them. You never know when your path may cross with somebody. You'll be able to share some good news with them, something like that. It certainly can happen. That's what the Good Samaritan did here. He, by chance, he came upon this. And then in Romans 8, verse 28, and we know that all things work together for the good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. Sometimes the bad things happen that can be good for us. Sometimes good things happen that can be good for us. But sometimes the good things aren't always good for us. Have you ever known of something good happening in a person's life and it caused them to depart from the Lord? It caused them to drift away. Well, you think that's a good thing, but it's not a good thing. Not if it causes them to depart. Have you ever noticed somebody where a bad thing happened to them and it brought them to the Lord? Well, that's a good thing. We get our thinking backwards sometimes, thinking if it's good, then it's got to be good for me. If it's bad, it's bad. But God can use just the opposite. He can use the bad to bring about the good. So the letter we read there at the beginning, we can see, maybe we can see her feelings. Maybe some of us have been there and understand exactly where she's been. But at the same time, maybe we can understand, I don't want to blame God for these things. The old devil may have had a hand in it. Who knows what he can do? Sure don't want to blame God when it's the devil doing it. Don't want to do that. That'd be terrible. Any comment? Anything? Next Wednesday, probably one more class on prayer, then we'll go to something else. But it's good to know some things, what God had to say to us, and learn from our difficulties in life. All right, a couple minutes early, so not time for the bell yet, but we'll hang out for about 5 minutes here.